Hello summoners and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video, and today we're going to take a look at the newest high elo tier list for the current patch. But before we hop into the video, we talk about a question of the day. Who is the strongest AD carry of this patch and why? I'm really curious to hear your answer, so I will not share mine because mine might be a little bit biased. Anyway, let's move over to our Baron lane pick of this patch. It's Wukong. This champion has been buffed through the roof and is now a staple pick for every single game you can ask for. You can blind pick this champion and just beat up your opponent in most instances. The reason for this is rather simple. The sustain this champion now has during fights is absurdly high. They really overdid themselves of buffing his first ability into the crazy amount, or the crazy state that it is right now. What does this actually change for you? So, as a staple item, you always want Divine Sandra. With the bonus healing from your item plus this buff to your first ability, you will out-sustain almost everyone on one item. The biggest idea here is that I want to present to you is about his rune choice. Previously, you would use Grasp procs in your lane as the staple choice because Grasp allows you to enter different trading patterns, but what about a different choice here? What about Lethal Tempo? Lethal Tempo as rune grants you attack speed. As all of you know, you have an attack speed set on your third ability, and your first ability's cooldown is reduced with every auto attack you hit on enemies. So if you're in a matchup where you're allowed to go all in and go for extended trades, Lethal Tempo on fully activating it will grant you an immense advantage when it comes to healing capabilities. That way, you'll out-sustain most of your enemies and go crazy. Other than this, you can still rely on your typical Grasp playstyle with short trading patterns or on Grasp with your first ability and then just play the lane normally. But with this, you can definitely delve into a change and see how it does and goes for you. And this is our full tier list for the Baron lane. Our next champion on this list is Morgana, and she's one of the best choices you can have or make for the jungle role. Morgana doesn't really struggle into many things about Fiora and hyper-aggressive champions, but even then she can pilot herself around the rift without too much trouble. Invading her and actually having an invadey playstyle requires a lot of attention, a lot of risk, and a lot of time. So if they mess up once, you'll outscale them pretty heavily. But here's one thing that was recently changed about Morgana, and it's related to Liandry's Torment. Liandry's Torment's base damage has been cut in half, but don't worry guys, you'll still build this item. You see many Morgana builds without Liandry's Torment. Let me get this straight really quick. They're trolling. It's absolutely terrible to not have Liandry's Torment on Morgana, and here's why. Liandry's Torment is an item that scales with heavy AP. The more AP you have, the more damage it will deal. But most of those builds feature very little AP, they go into the supportive type of deal. So don't ever, please I repeat this, if you want to deal damage as a Morgana, building Rylai's Crystal Scepter is gonna handicap your damage a lot. So rather than doing this, you'll make the decision of going Luden's Echo as your first item, and then you have to make the next decision. Is it going to be Liandry's Torment with less base damage, or Rabadon's Deathcap for higher AP? Nevertheless, on your third item, or the latest the fourth item, you will have a Liandry's Torment. Trust me, because if you don't have a Liandry's Torment, your champion is significantly weaker. Trust me. And afterwards, you will have a completed build such as Luden's Echo, Liandry's Torment, Rabadon's Deathcap, Void Staff, and Riftmaker. With those items assembled, you'll easily deal up to 4% of the maximum enemy's HP, times 3, in the late game once they touch your puddle. Don't forget, Morgana is a non-interactive champion that can just fish for engages with her first ability and poke out the enemy during zone control fights with just her second ability. It is absolutely insane that people don't build Liandry's Torment on this champion. It's broken. Please don't grieve yourself. Don't listen to anyone who tells you not to build Liandry's Torment on Morgana. Please, you will thank me later. And this is our full tier list for the jungle role. For our next pick of this patch, we have Corki in the middle lane. Corki can also be classified as a champion that doesn't really need to interact with the enemy laner. He cannot really lose any matchup in the middle lane because yeah, he can just not play the lane. He can CS from range and just relax and just do nothing and just safely scale into the later stages of the game. To do so in the fastest manner, however, you need to rush Essence Reaper. Even though the item completion on your first item really blows and it just isn't the best you can get, it really helps you get to a beefier or rather stronger variant of yourself earlier. if you go for the Essence Reaver, you need to go Mana Flow, otherwise you'll not have enough mana and the mana refund from your Essence Reaver will not be good enough. So it's kind of a tricky situation. Many people will also be very happy to hear that Corki's base stats are getting buffed in terms of HP and armor. With that in mind, people are not even forced to build Black Cleaver anymore, because well, you're getting a lot of base stats and you can go into more damage earlier, which allows you to carry even earlier and better in a more, let's say, consistent way. Because don't forget, having a Black Cleaver Corki is a little bit, well, way weaker than a crit Corki. As for little tricks that you need to implement when it comes to your Corki gameplay, whenever you're on the way and have downtime towards an objective, you can use your ultimate ability to stack up your big rocket and then keep that big rocket for the fight. That way you'll have immediately more burst damage or poke damage to influence the fight before the fight even starts. If you only have little rockets, you'll still have an impact, but they won't obviously be as big as the impact you'd have with a big rocket. But don't forget, you'll have to spend charges of your ultimate, so you need plenty of time. Usually you get that time when you walk back to lane or towards the objective to get these charges back. It's really helpful. Another secret that might be a big difference maker in this patch might be, big emphasis on might be, Navori Quick Blades on your champion. With that, you'll have access to more mobility thanks to the reset on your second ability, more DPS in the form of your third ability, and obviously more bombs, which you will not be using in the late game because it self-stuns you, and not being able to auto-attack in hyper late game as an AD carry feels really bad. And this is our full tier list for the mid lane. The next champion on this list is Varus, and Varus is the big winner of this patch yet again. This champion, if you remember my introductory question, who's the strongest AD carry of this patch? Well, it is Varus without a doubt on my mind. This champion has been the pinnacle of AD carry champions for a long time now in competitive and solo queue. The reasons for this are rather simple. This champion can influence the fight similar to other champions or mage-like AD carries from very far away. They don't really have to interact with the enemy to influence the fight. And even if they get hands-on with other champions, they can go into a different route. They can go even into the AP build and melt tanks in an instant. It doesn't matter if the enemy Sion has 6k HP, a full AP Varus will literally one-tap him. It's so crazy. But what other than this makes Varus such a strong pick? Well, number one, it's the non-interactive poke with his first ability. Number two, it is the lovely zone control he has with his ultimate ability. So what do I mean when I talk about zone control with an ultimate ability? Rather than going with the ultimate for like a money target, what about a target that is in front of you but then denies the enemy's champion entrance to the fight? Because don't forget, once enemies go close to Varus' ultimate target, they will also be tagged by it, rooted by it, and get all those stacks. With those stacks now we can go forward to number 3, Varus' damage potential. If you are tagged by 3 of those and Varus chooses to hit you with a spell, he'll proc all of those blight stacks, dealing a percentage amount of your HP in magical damage. That is quite the problem when you realize what he can do with this. If he does this with his third ability, you'll receive a major amount of damage, and afterwards you can use his empowered first ability with the second ability to literally decimate you. That is something you have to consider. And this is our full tier list for the AD carry role. Last but not least, we have kind of the exotic pick for solo queue, but a solid staple for competitive play. It's Nasus in the support role. Now, everybody's like, what is Nasus doing in the support role? What the hell? Hear me out. Nasus becomes a very tanky target with just a little item and his ultimate ability. Not only that, his third ability reduces enemy armor by a lot. Now if you combine this with his second ability Wither, he becomes quite the problem to deal with, especially if you're an AD carry or a frontline character that needs to move. But what else might be a problem with this champion? Obviously you can combine this champion with other champions that have armor reducing capabilities such as Jarvan or Vi. Now if you add a Varus to the mix, who is benefiting from this armor pen and has armor percentage pen himself from building Cyrilda's Grudge or having lethality items, you will realize that the damage they buffing each other is kind of insane. And as for your playstyle, it's rather simple. All you have to do is spam your third ability into the enemy's face and that's it. You do this on repeat all the time you can, and that's all you have to do, up until a point where you're tanking enough for items where you can just run at them and be a frontline for your teammates. Using your second ability and your third ability on cooldown will just be, well, all you have to do. It's very simple, yet super effective. And this is our full tier list for the support role. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you want more RiftGuides content, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and everything you need. See you soon for more content.